Hi all, watched Doctor Who episode 2, Sontarans on Horses this week, and I genuinely finished it with no clue what to make of it. I don't know what it was. I just kind of looked there and thought, I don't know what I'm going to say about this one. I think in part it was because it felt at times very much like a good era episode of Doctor Who. Even though there were some plot holes, it didn't feel necessarily narratively out of place within Moffat or RTD's runs. But it just left me feeling a whole emptiness, really, whole nothing. It washed over me, and I really didn't seem to take much in. Anyway, I'll kind of try and go through it in some sort of sequence in my usual stream of random consciousness way, address things as I come to them. At the end of the last episode, it was a cliffhanger. The Doctor, Dan, and Yaz were in the TARDIS. The Earth had been protected by the space dogs and their ships. The flux was coming on the Doctor, and the Doctor had blasted it with time vortex energy, and it didn't stop it. So all the doors of the TARDIS burst open. They were in imminent danger. Cliffhanger. And then, very much like an RKO serial from back in the day, those who are old will remember these being on telly. You know, the old Flash Gordons and Buck Rogerses. Suddenly this episode starts, they're on Earth, they've all been thrown outside the TARDIS, and that's that. Some weird vision of a weird house, but that's that. It's kind of like, okay, so what happened? Now, it might be, again, that's something that's filled in later and we find that there's a reason why that happened. But it feels very half-arsed. I'm just going to go with that. Very, very half-arsed. Felt like, very much like a Moffat thing where they couldn't actually be bothered to fulfill the promise of the end of the last episode or explain how they got to this position. So that was a bit jarring. Then they kind of trying to figure out where they are. So the Doctor finds the dead body of a British soldier. She, Yaz, and Dan kind of hover around it. And then Mary Seacole turns up, kind of remonstrates with them for stealing from the dead. A strange thing to do because according to her own memoirs, she used to steal from the dead. But there you go. And she's talking about, you know, how they can't be with Mary Nightingale's lot because they're too close to the front. Again, not quite historically accurate. Obviously, this is your woman from history revelation. Don't get me wrong, I kind of get that. It's a massive trope from this show that just kind of gets boring and predictable. But by the same token, there are a lot of people who've done remarkable things through history. And whether this represents her accurately, she clearly was a remarkable woman. And so I'm kind of split on that one, is that on one hand, it's the predictable norm from this, but on the other hand, you are highlighting someone that maybe should be remembered. She then takes them off to her kind of bar cum hospital. As they arrive at the bar, Dan vanishes. And then seconds later, Yaz vanishes. And obviously now the Doctor's abandoned wherever she is, which turns out to be the Crimea War. So she goes in to the bar cum hospital with Mary Seagrove. I want to call her Mary Seagrove, I don't know why. Mary Seacole. In there's a commander who's drinking and sort of lots of soldiers around. And at some point in the show, she kind of makes a comment about food and drink is on the tab, but the care they get for free. I can't remember the exact nature of the conversation, but basically it turns out that Russia and China no longer exist, and it's all been taken over by the Sontarans. And Mary and the commander have a vague memory of Russia and China, but they don't really, which the Doctor decides is because history is being rewritten, but they have echoes of it. I'm just going to concentrate on the main story to start with, and then I'll fill the gaps with the rest. The Doctor, obviously confused, tries to figure out what's going on. It turns out that Mary Seacole has been treating a Sontaran, which apparently she used to actually treat Russian prisoners during the Crimean, as well as kind of British soldiers. Mary Seacole tells the Doctor that the Sontaran, every 27 hours he goes to sleep, and then 7.5 minutes later he wakes up again. Doctor's really interested in this, and she kind of decides to release the soldier so he can go back to his command. She can follow him And she does this by telling him that the Doctor is around. So they follow him and they find the base of operations for Sontarans, which is hidden. That soldier goes and tells his commander, and this commander kills him because he didn't die a glorious death in battle. He was captured, which obviously is against Sontaran code. I can't remember at what point, but I think at some point the Doctor tells Mary to stay where she is and take notes and record what happens. The Doctor's basically organised a parley with the commander. She has the parley where she kind of does her typical supply teacher version of the Doctor. She creeps closer to being the Doctor in this episode again, but it still just doesn't do it for me. The Sontaran commander is quite sneering about her. She does the "they're protected by me, I speak for these people," and he kind of just sneers at her because it kind of has all the authority of a milkmaid. Milkmaid? I don't know where I got that reference from. It's random. However, the commander kind of stops her in her tracks and tells her, puts a gun to the Doctor's head and tells her to go away, basically. And the Doctor's kind of telling him he's an idiot, that he's going to, all the men are going to die, they can't fight the Sontarans. Basically, a soldier then starts walking the Doctor back. Big battle. It's a very cool scene, clearly CGI'd, but you've got the British and Sontaran forces just charging at each other in a battle. It's interspersed with smaller moments where you can tell how many people are actually there, but it's kind of cut together quite impressively, so it's not as jarring as sometimes, when you kind of see CGI of a great big battle and then you sort of see 3 people fighting, and it's obvious that it's not the scale that it kind of pretends to be, but it comes across okay, this bit. The Sontarans go back because they've had a glorious victory. The commander survives, goes back to the hospital where Doctor basically says, "You're going to listen to me now," and she tells the plan, and she's decided that Sontarans, from the information that Mary gave, that the Sontarans can't deal with the atmosphere on Earth, so have to go back to their ships every 27 hours to recharge their armours with an atmosphere that they can breathe. Given that the Sontaran who was captured was still alive, and Mary had recorded him going to sleep and waking up again, that really makes no sense whatsoever. But let's go with it because, hey, things like that happen. I mean, it makes no sense. It also makes no sense that the Doctor's conclusion would be that's why they do it, given you've had a Sontaran who did it and survived with no problems whatsoever. But, So she has this plan where she'll wait until the Sontarans all retreat into their ships. She'll take a small cadre of soldiers with her and the commander, and they will disconnect them from their kind of ports, or they'll basically reconnect them from the atmosphere that they need to continue. The method of doing this is in the legs of the ships for some random reason, so obviously just the perfect height for people to get at easily, and to do it is remarkably easy as well. It's just pull this out, unconnect that, job done. I mean, it's clearly a superior force. Oh, and I forgot to mention, every single Sontaran goes in to the ships at the same time. Bearing in mind, these have been billed as this dangerous, deadly force of soldiers who can't be defeated. They live to kill, they live to fight, and yet somehow they don't think to post guards. They all go into the ships at the same time. Now, it could be said that that's arrogance and a bit of stupidity, which is a dangerous mix. However, they already know that the Doctor's around. So it kind of feels like another MacGuffin. You got kind of a MacGuffin to beat the Sontarans and a MacGuffin for where the actual method of disconnecting is. With all that disconnected, personally, I don't see why they can't reconnect, but I guess they have to stay on their ships. It's all a bit nonsense because just stay on your ships with the atmosphere, reconnect it all, then start the war again. But there you go. The Sontaran commander says he's going to do a strategic withdrawal rather than a surrender. And as they're getting back in the ships, the commander of the British forces has basically planted a load of dynamite. Somehow the Doctor didn't notice the piles and piles of dynamite around the ships and blows them up. The Doctor gets really angry, rebukes him severely, says, men like you make me wonder why I save you, which, men like you, obviously. Mary Seacole says, thank God you do. The Doctor goes back to the TARDIS, and previously she couldn't get into the TARDIS, and now she can. And when she tries to start the TARDIS flying, it's kind of jittery like it was before. I'll now deal with the Dan bit. So Dan, when he disappears, he's zapped to the present where he's on his street and his neighbour's banging on the window. And he kind of goes, what? His neighbour kind of waves his arms and ignores him. Another neighbour does the same thing. And then he turns around and there's a massive Sontaran ship over Anfield. Then a load of Sontaran troops come around the corner and start shooting at him. And once again, highly trained soldiers bred for war, and they can't hit a barn door with a bulldozer. They are firing all over the place. And if I remember correctly, Dan is just running in a straight line anyway. So, I mean, stormtrooper level of accuracy and then some. So he runs around a corner into an alleyway and suddenly hears a bang and a clatter behind him. And 2 Sontarans have been knocked down. There's 2 people from Brookside because it's Liverpool, so Brookside, yay. Not totally sure what happened to all of the other Sontarans who were chasing him. Maybe they just went somewhere else. I don't know. Anyway, Dan decides to find out what's going on. He suddenly becomes Rambo, kind of a personality jump there. Something else is that he becomes kind of very Rambo-esque and also seems really familiar with the Doctor. And if you bear in mind, he barely knows her. Yaz is the one who freed him. He's had more interaction with Yaz, but he seems weirdly connected to the Doctor. It doesn't really make a lot of sense. He then goes into the ships, sees people being killed by the Sontarans. I mean, he's deeply moved. He's crushed. He really struggles with it. He's very somber and serious. Oh, no, he isn't. He carries a walk around acting like a fool, cracking the odd stupid joke and really giving no impression that he's just seen 3 people murdered in front of him. Breaks his way onto the ship. Lots of stupidity stuff. Manages to connect to the Doctor through a time communicator or something. It turns out that the reason the Sontarans are in the Crimea is because there's been a setup where the Sontarans managed to get through the Space Dog's barrier and avoid the flux. But because of the flux, they were able to somehow travel in time, which they seem to have some sort of temporal shift technology, because every fucker can time travel these days. He's attacked by Sontarans. Space Dog turns up just in the nick of time, and they escape the ships and basically plan to fly the ship they're in into the other Sontaran fleet, which will wipe out every single Sontaran on the planet and blink them all out of existence. Dan and him escape through a little portal, and it's probably some of the worst CGI I've ever seen with them. Literally, the spaceship's flying past and you just see these 2 little blobs flying out in completely weird angle. Anyone who knows about momentum means they wouldn't be falling the way they were falling, let alone quite so obviously fakely. Crashes into the ships, blink out of existence. Doctor turns up at this minute and is basically congratulating Dan for what he'd done. Yay, Dan, you've murdered thousands of Sontarans. Yay, good on you, Dan. I mean, she wasn't happy with the last person killing loads of Sontarans, and that was in the middle of a war. But yay, Dan. Moral wonky Doctor Who again. The third part of this, which is intersected in between, it starts off with Vinder arriving at this temple of weirdness. He's led through a tunnel by an arrogant, I don't know what you call him, an arrogant triangular pyramid that's upside down. He's led to an empty room. He steps up a couple of steps. In the centre, there's a kind of a plinth, and these women appear. And we're told at some point, I'm not sure if it's this point or a bit later on, that these are the Maori, and they control time. Time flows through them. They monitor it and control it because time is evil and time is mad. It's a load of guff. I'm sure it's supposed to sound clever, but for me it just came across as a load of kind of highfalutin nonsense. I don't know. Anyway, that might have happened after Yaz appeared, that particular conversation, but that doesn't matter. Yaz appears in the same place for some random reason. We don't even know why Vinder's there. She bumps into the Liverpudlian industrialist that we met in the first episode. He talks a load of gibberish, wanders off. She then finds the temple, finds Vinder, conversation. Swarm and his sister, whose name is Azure, which is a terrifying name, and a third person who looks like he's got a paintball mask on called the Passenger, and he's kind of this big muscular figure who doesn't say anything. Not sure why they need a big muscular figure considering they can disintegrate people at a touch or at a thought in the case of Swarm, but there you go. So they make their way to the temple of nonsense and they destroy the floating triangles. Vinda tries to kill them and Swarm is dashing around all over the place. And I don't know if you remember me saying that Swarm came across as quite sinister in the last episode. I mean, he kind of feels like he's camping it up in this one. I don't know, he seems wacky and silly. Yeah, I don't know. His threat, it seems much more minimised in this one. His sister, Azure, seems much more threatening and sinister, but he just kind of, it's turned into something very weird. At the end of the episode, when the Doctor takes Dan, Sontarans are finished, she gets in the TARDIS with Dan, the TARDIS suddenly flies off of its own accord, and they arrive at the temple, and there is Azure, Swarm, and the passenger. But no Yaz and Vinda. And then there's kind of I can't really call it a confrontation, a bit of a chit-chat between the Doctor and the Swarm, and basically it turns out that Swarm has put Vinda and Yaz in the place of these women and is saying how time, at the click of his fingers, time will flow through them and it will destroy them. Now, will it? I don't know. We've not seen any evidence that it will. We're being told it will. If they showed someone else in that position and time went through them and they evaporated, then fine. I mean, to be honest with you, I don't know how this guy's got the power to control time in that way, because he seems to have a very vague power base at the moment, which is really, again, it's the second episode, so they probably haven't explained it properly, and they probably will explain more as it goes along, but he seems to have an unspecified power, which is quite common these days. Doctor saying, no, don't, which is probably the only time she's ever actually appeared to give a shit about Yaz, but there you go. And that's when it ends with him about to click his fingers, very Thanos-like. Yeah, it's just something about it. It's just something about this episode. So, as I say, the whole kind of Crimean War, Sontarans story, that's a good story. Plot holes you could drive an aeroplane through. It was okay. It was fun. The Sontarans were funny at times. I actually laughed out loud at one point. I think it was the point where he said he wanted to. The reason they were at the Crimea War was because he wanted to ride a horse. But the problem is, the whole thing really doesn't hold up to any kind of scrutiny. So the idea is the Sontarans arrive in the present, use the flux or some temporal technology to send a force back in time as an expeditionary force to see if they can conquer the past. Now, given they've conquered the present, I don't know why they're bothering doing that. And given that Russia and China don't exist, the Sontarans must have been there for a long time for people not to really remember that they existed. Which means, why are the Sontarans fighting the Crimean War? Why haven't they already taken over the Earth in the past? The whole concept doesn't make sense. And then you've got this temple of nonsense stuff, which is just so vague. As usual, it's all tell and no show. These people do this because we're telling you they do it. This happens because we're telling you it happens. There's a problem because 2 of them are damaged. We don't know what the problem is. We don't know how they got damaged. We don't know why it's a problem. We know it wasn't Swarm or his sister that damaged them because they've only just arrived and apparently they're banned from the temple, so they can't stand on the plinth. So maybe the flux damaged them. We don't know. That whole temple bit is a whole load of information with nothing to back it up. There's no evidence that anything being said actually is true. This is probably why I feel like it's a load of guff, because there's literally nothing that proves anything that anyone is saying in that situation. And we're told that this is dangerous, and we're told this is threatening, and we're told this is a real problem. It's like, why? You're doing the exposition thing again. Show, don't tell. Is them being damaged what's caused the flux? Has the flux damaged them? Does time actually go through them? Does it not? Is time manifest and evil? I mean, that is a massive concept if that's what you're saying, that time is a consciousness. I think that's the biggest problem. I think the main story is fine, within reason, but that stuff just doesn't make sense. So so this is why I struggle with this episode. It's okay. Yeah, it's okay. I keep saying this for these episodes. It's okay. It's not the worst thing I've seen. I say the moral ambiguity is there. The yay women boo men thing is there. It's much milder than usual, but obviously Mary C. Cole is the most amazing woman in the world, so that bit's there. There's a bit of man bashing in that, but it's not so much. They kind of make him look stupid a couple of times. You know, obviously there's the bit where the Doctor says it's men like you, whereas really it should be it's people like you. It might be that I'm overly aware of this stuff, but that stuck out to me as being a very specific way of saying something. You know, when people write scripts, they make decisions, and that seemed like a very specific decision to actually refer to men. But yeah, I think that's it. I think that's pretty much where I've gone. So I'll leave you with the following. Here is the shameless plug for Marked by myself, Andy Radbourne, which is available through Indiegogo, and the link is down below in the description. Check it out, see what you think, and I'd appreciate your support. Thank you very much. Peace out.